Hey, I'm Aaron, trail name is OG, and if you've been following along with my channel, then you know that I just recently completed thru hike at Appalachian Trail. If you're new to my channel, you probably just came to this video because this is about finances, and maybe you're getting ready to start an AT thru hike of your own next year, and just curious about how much money you should need to bring with you, or how much you should plan to spend. So in this video, I'm going to cover exactly what I spent on my AT thru hike. I'm going to go over what my budget was. I started with $6,000. So I'm going to tell you why you should start with more than that and why you'll probably need more than $6,000. So without any further ado, I'll get into the budget of what I spent, where I spent it, and why you should bring more than that.
Yeah, so to start with, my budget was $6,000, like I mentioned, but that did not include the gear that I had. So I purchased all my gear beforehand, so my expenses do not include gear. So it does include shoes that I bought along the trail and any kind of small miscellaneous items, gear items that I bought along the trail as well. So I want to share with you my screen here and show you exactly what I have by expenses broken out. So these are the total expenses. I've got them broken out by day, what I spent. And then across the bottom here, I've got tabs that show exactly what I spent. So by month, I started February 23rd of 2023. So February was kind of my shortest month, and I only spent $202. March was a full month, but I was very frugal, and I only spent $693. And then we kind of get into April, May, June, and then July. And you can see my average through there was around $1,300. June here, I was up in the northern area. It was a little bit more expensive up there. And by this time, I was tired, and I was having to go into towns a little bit more often. I was just having a little bit of trouble, just kind of recovering. And then July, I summited on July 23rd. So July was not a full month as well. So you can see my total was $6,031. And as I mentioned, I started with $6,000, so just $31 over. But I did receive some help along the way from Trail Angels. I received some cash. I received some donations. So that although I was $31 over, I had some reserves to tap into because of that. See, this is kind of a breakdown. I got cash along the way, a few different places, about $540. And then I started with some cash as well. I think I started with around $150 out of that $6,000. So I always had a little bit of cash with me, but it was never, I never had a ton with me. So food and drink was one of the largest expenses. That was 2016. So food and drink is separate from resupplies. So food and drink is really just, when I got to a convenience store and I wanted a drink, or when I got to a restaurant and I wanted a meal. So that's really kind of the breakdown of food and drink to $2,000. Gear, like I mentioned, my $6,000 did not include my big three, my quilt, my tent, my backpack, and those types of things. But it did involve a few things that I bought along the way. So you can see I bought a small little cork ball and some fuel. I bought a pillow at Uncle Johnny's because the pillow that I had had a slow leak, and so I needed to replace it. Fuel, insoles for my shoes. Here's where I bought my second pair of shoes. My first pair of shoes, Honey Stinger brought to me in Hot Springs, but I got those free because I had RAI points. So they were technically free. You can see KT tape, bandages. That was from the dog bite incident, water filter, and some underwear. Fuel, shoes again. I bought an Alpha hoodie. I switched out of the heavy fleece that I had for the winter time and just wanted a small lightweight hoodie. Bug spray, should say bug spray. And then shoes again. So total for gear was $838. Haircut. So I got 3 haircuts along the way. The first one was in Bland. The next one was in Port Clinton. And then the last one was in Hanover. So definitely felt better about myself when I got my haircut. I never did trim the beard, and I still haven't trimmed it yet. So still going to keep it for a little bit. Lodging, I've got it broken out. I did stay at a couple hostels that allowed tenting, and so that total ended up being $64. I stayed in a couple private rooms. Actually, I only stayed in one private room. That was when Honey Stinger came out with me. That was 65 bunks. Was my typical way that was my typical lodging, and so that total was 603. And then I stayed at a couple motels, and that total was 519. So you can see where I have it broken out. The hotels I stayed at the Franklin Inn in Franklin, and I stayed at Fontana Dam, and the Doyle in Duncannon, the Travel Lodging in Great Barrington, but my cousin Bill covered that. So my cousin Bill came out and hiked with me for the state of Massachusetts, and he took me out to dinner and covered that hotel. So you can just kind of factor that in. The West Bethel Motel and the Sterling Inn, that was kind of like more of a sort of more like a B&B type setup with shared bathrooms, but a great little nice private room. Loved the Sterling Inn, such a nice place. And the Catamount Motel. So let's see, none of those were shared. So let's see, total on lodging was $1,322. I'd say that's probably pretty typical. I did mention that when I got up here towards New Hampshire and Maine, I did stay in hotels and in hostels a little bit more often than I had been kind of early on in the trip. But I was tired. And the weather was really bad. We had a ton of rain, and so I did stay, in town a little bit more often here at the end. All right, so resupply, that's basically just, resupplying for food. So the total I spent there was $1,133. I did have a few gift cards that I started out with. I resupplied at Dollar General's, Walmart's, Food Cities, and then just kind of grocery stores along the way. The Appalachian Market in Garrison, New York was a really cool little place right there on the trail, but it was very expensive. That $47 was not very much food at all. Price Chopper was very common in the northern states as well. I just want to point out this Rangeley IGA was super nice. And there was a, let's see, this market was really nice too. Anyway, there were a lot of really nice markets along the way. And then my last resupply was at Shaw's Hiker Hostel. They have a great resupply there as well. And I was carrying, too many days of food, a bunch. So that was my expenses there. So resupply, $1,133, lodging, $1,322, couple haircuts, $85, miscellaneous gear, $838, food and drink, $2,016, cash back, that I just used along the way for various incidentals, $539. So overall, budget was $6,000, spent $6,031. But as I mentioned, I did receive some help along the way from Trail Angels. So I did get some money that way as well.
So can you do it for $6,000 or less? Yes, absolutely. Would I recommend it? Probably not. So I did it for right at $6,000. But like I mentioned, I did have some help from Trail Angels and from support from viewers. I did receive some donations, and that really helped. Also not included in my total was my plane ride home. So Honey Stinger bought my plane ride home. So I didn't include that, but you got to get home somehow. But you could walk, but then you're going to have more expenses. Anyway, you got to get home somehow. Figure another $300 at least for getting home. I was pretty frugal, but I also, when I went to town, I ate whatever I wanted. When I went to a convenience store, if I was hungry, I bought food. If I was thirsty, I bought drinks. A lot of times I said, I'm out here hiking for food. I was hungry all the time. So, I didn't deny myself any food or resupply. all of those I spent, what I wanted to. I didn't go into town as often as some people did, and I didn't stay at hotels and motels as often as some people did. So I was a little bit more frugal there. I didn't get private rooms very often. I think only one, like I mentioned that one time. So I was always in the bunk room. But for the most part, that was fine. So can you do it for $6,000? Yeah, you can. You'd need to be frugal, and you'd need to cut some expenses. But I recommend $7,000. I think you'd have everything covered, and if you're not receiving support from trail angels or supporters along the way, then that will kind of cover the added expenses and what you might need along the way. So I had an awesome time. I would do it again. That's what I spent. I hope you found this video informative. I hope it helps you on your planning. If you are planning to go, man, I'm jealous. I'm so jealous. I wish I could do it again. Maybe someday. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing. Hit the like button, or not. Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great hike.